Hello, everyone. It is Monday, January 13th, and I'll show you the outside here, show you how that's going. So we had 4 inches of snow last week. It is very slow to melt off, but it's, more snow than we had last year. It only snowed twice last year, and it was both times it burned off within 3 or 4 hours. So, we've been enjoying it because where I come from in St. Petersburg, Florida, spent all of my years since 1965 up until 2023. Yeah, we didn't get snow. So there's, you get a lot of the beach, very much beach culture there. I'm not a big beach guy. I've always loved the mountains, which is why when my wife and I reached retirement age and we got an inheritance that we knew nothing about that was coming down the line, we thought, oh my goodness, we can now retire and go to our favorite spot in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, enjoy the Smoky Mountains for the rest of our lives. And an Airbnb that we had been staying in, which is where we're living now. I worked up the nerve one day to ask the owner lady, who was a realtor, by the way, if we could buy this place. And she looked at me and she said, that might could happen. Well, one thing led to another, and about 15 months later, after we had everything in place, we were able to buy the house and needs some work. We've been doing a lot of work on it. And as you may have been hearing me talk about, we're building a new studio so that I can get out of the living room here. And the studio will be for music recording, podcasting. I'll be doing video work up there, all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's just the construction's going a lot slower than I had hoped. We've also had some work stoppages, what with the big snowstorm, the hurricane that came through, all that stuff. So anyway, there's somebody here working now, and I hope that there will be somebody working here until it's completed now. We'll see. But I just decided to set my stuff up here in the living room and start doing shows because I'm retired and I don't have a whole lot else to do. I could take my guitar and go down on Everett Street here and start busking for all of the tourists who come to town each day, especially when the train is running. Train's not running right now. They're off right now. I think they're just doing it on weekends. But I put together a busking rig to be able to play music and sing in the back of my pickup truck. I just park right on the main street down there, which is only about 4 blocks long, and just do my music down there. And I'll put out a bucket out there that says retirement fund, Yeah, I'll be doing it then. Anyway, so my show is going to be talking about, of course, we'll get into some politics and some other stuff. I got one new feature I want to show you today, and here's the stinger.
Breaking news.
That's right. It's the Krass Report. And what is that? Well, those of you on X, formerly Twitter, may be familiar with twin brothers, Brian and Ed Krassenstein. And they are kind of young fellers, probably in their 30s or 40s. Entrepreneurs, crypto, they buy and sell web domains, including porn, a lot of stuff that, not having really work really hard at it, which is cool. You don't have to work hard to make a good living. But the two of them together, they love to post on X. They have quite the following. I don't really mess with Ed too much because he's not nearly as prolific as Brian is. Brian sits around all day dreaming up things to post on X. And he is monetized. So, and he gets tens of thousands of views for each of his posts. And he makes money from that. And that's great. That's just another way to make money. And that's cool. I hope to be doing that one day. But for now, I'm just doing this as a hobby. Understand, these guys are both major league capitalists. But for some reason, they're real far on the left, which seems odd because the left wants to destroy capitalism, own everything, and make you subservient. So I don't know, maybe with enough time, they can swing a little bit more to the right and understand what personal freedom and personal responsibility is all about. So I thought I'd go over some of his posts in the days and weeks to come and just pick them apart for what they are, because he's constantly using the straw man argument, false equivalencies, I say false narratives or just fictional narratives. You'll see what I'm saying. So the thing to do with this man is not to respond angrily to him with name calling and all that nonsense. The proper thing to do is to pick apart his arguments. He'll conflate this thing with this thing, and the two have nothing to do with each other. But because he put it in his post, he gets you thinking that way, that's his whole game. And he sits back and has a huge belly laugh every day. Key is to not take the bait, to pick apart his arguments and throw it back in his face. All right. You take away his power. Take this post, for example. Well, Mexico just sent dozens of brave firefighters to help battle the raging California wildfires, risking their lives to protect American families and homes. Here we go. You ready? I mean, you could stop there. It'd be a wonderful post, right? Awesome. That's really cool, Brian. There's no virtue signaling in that. No, it's just a cool thing these guys are doing. All right. No. That wouldn't be a Brian post, would it? Isn't it remarkable how acts of selflessness and humanity can cross borders while fear-mongering and hostility seem confined to political agendas? Question mark. Maybe if you focused less on walls and more on bridges, you'd realize that people's lives are worth more than political stunts. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Let's go to the first sentence in this second paragraph. Isn't it remarkable how acts of selflessness and humanity can cross borders, comma? Yes, that's remarkable, and it's awesome. Now let's conflate that with something that has nothing to do with it. While fear-mongering and hostility seem confined to political agendas, you see, one thing has nothing to do with the other thing. He's just trying to poke a finger in your eye here. Fear-mongering and hostility. Well, who's fear-mongering and hostile? Who is that? Who is it? Is that you? It's not me. Is it you? Are you fear-mongering? And are you hostile towards others, especially others on the left? I'm not hostile towards them. I'm not fear-mongering. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? Seems confined to political agendas. Well, no, of course not. Fear-mongering and hostility confined to political agendas? Well, why don't you tell that to the drug cartels? Why don't you tell that to all the people looting in California right now? All right. That it's a political agenda. Well, no, it isn't. So anyway, that's a false equivalency. You see, isn't it this thing remarkable? At the same time, this is happening. Well, but the two aren't related to each other. Okay, so there's that. Maybe if you focus less on walls and more on bridges. Okay, so obviously that's just another poke at having a border wall. What's wrong with a border wall? What's wrong with a border wall? You tell me. All right. Especially when we now have over 1 million young men of fighting military age who are in our country as gotaways who are forming alliances and sleeper cells and all that sort of stuff just because, we threw the border open 4 years ago, wide open, so anybody could come in. Of course, it got completely out of control. Don't want to get in all that. I'm just saying, maybe if it focused less on walls and more on bridges, we're going to build bridges to Mexico so that we just let them all in, from anywhere in the world who are filtering through Mexico to come up into the United States. Come on, man. So maybe if it focused less on walls and more on bridges, a little virtue signaling there, don't you think? You'd realize that people's lives are worth more than just political stunts. Well, what's a political stunt? Is building a border wall a political stunt? No, it's the right thing to do for national security. Anyway. That's it for the Crash Report today. Let's move on to something else. I saw a video on YouTube the other day from a man who has had a great deal of success on YouTube with his channels, his videos, and talking about how the algorithms are changing and different kinds of people are going to be able to be more successful in 2025 on YouTube. And he was talking about, what's really going to be popular is like an old man telling a story. And I'm like, whoa, wow, I've got that nailed down. I'm 67. I'm retired. And I've got some great stories from my touring days and from all kinds of stuff. So I thought, I guess that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be old man story time. So let's get started, shall we? I joined an entertainment company at the tender age of 19. And this entertainment company actually recruited me to be a drummer, singer, and entertainer for their company. They're called Young American Showcase. That thing went for 20 years. It lasted from 1970 to about 1990. And over all those years, they put together so many different bands that did shows all over North America, United States and Canada. rock and roll, a little comedy, and a motivational message. And we did those shows in high schools all over North America. Talk about a fun life. We had a great time. There was no drugs and alcohol, no fornication, nothing like that. We're just good Christian boys going into schools, and most of our messages were just, positive, uplifting stuff, rights and responsibilities. And we were all Christians, and we would have our own, Bible studies together and that sort of thing. And for a lot of us, that was how we learned a lot about the Bible and about who Jesus was and all that stuff. I've heard people criticize it. You all are a cult. No, that wasn't a cult of any kind. We didn't even go to church. We stayed in our motels most of the time when we weren't out working. And we were out working a lot. We would have to do a show in the morning at one school. We do a show in the afternoon at another school. And then we would go back to one of the other schools we had done maybe earlier in the week, and we'd do a nighttime concert where the students would pay like $5 to see a rock show. And of course, we had posters, and some of them had records and tapes and that sort of thing. Back in the day, I used to write a lot of original songs, and got to work on an album project where we made a cassette tape that the bands would sell at their shows. And it was good stuff. It was a lot of fun. We had a great time, really, really good time. I spent 3 years as an entertainer, and then it looked like I was going to quit and get on with my life. But what happened was they asked me to be a director. And what that meant was I would drive a car around to all the different groups that we had produced. They put them all together in Florida, and then they'd all go out on their tours. And the tours were 10 months long. And you would get a couple of weeks off at Christmas. But other than that, they were out there doing 3 shows a day most of the time. And I would go out in my car, and I would go from group to group to group, band, and work on the show, try to make the show better. Well, how that turned out was they would send me to a group that's having problems with somebody in the band. And they would send me there to fire one of the group members. And then I would have to get up in the group and perform in their place until the company sent me somebody new to work into the show, which meant sometimes I would go visit one group and I'd be there for 6 weeks or more. And if it was a drummer or a lead singer or a bass player, I could do it. I play guitar, but I never got into the lead, no Jimmy Page. I'll tell you that's not any stretch of the imagination. And that was fun. As soon as I became a director, I married my longtime girlfriend, Karen, and we went on the road together. And we started, our first tour was the fall of 1981. And we did 3 tours, she and I together. And then we took a year off, and we both got jobs, and we thought that was it. That was the end of it. And after 1 year, they called us up and they said, we'd really like to have you all back. And we said, well, can we get a motorhome? And they said, well, sure. So I said, okay, we'll come back. And we did. We toured all the way up until the summer of 1990. But that was fun times. Those were good times. There's a book about it. And I understand they're also making a documentary film about it now. The book is called God's Rock and Roll Army, and you can get it on Amazon. A lot of great stories in there. I wrote a chapter in there, and I'm going to talk about that today. My third tour, it was a small band. It was only a 4-piece band. We didn't have a lead singer, so it was just bass, guitar, drums, and keyboards. And we did all the singing and stuff ourselves. We didn't have a lead singer. So we were sent to all the maritime provinces in Canada in about this time, but January, February, March. And we played Nova Scotia. And then from there, from Sydney, Nova Scotia, we took a ferry boat to Newfoundland. And that was a long trip. Can't remember how long, but I remember it was a long trip. And we had our big truck, with full of the equipment. The front part of it was customized for traveling. And then we had all the equipment in the back. And we traveled with the sound system. Our manager who traveled with us, he would be the sound man. So we got off at Port-aux-Basques in Newfoundland, and we started driving. Newfoundland's it's very much a wilderness island. It's not a lot of it is inhabitable, but the places on the coastlines is where the cities are, is on the coastlines. So we would play the schools, and they were all Catholic schools in Newfoundland. All the schools were Catholic schools. So, and of course it was the middle of the winter in Newfoundland. So that meant a lot of times the road conditions were not too good at all. we worked our way all the way around Newfoundland. We got to the other side, which is where the one big city is, if you want to call that. It's called St. John's. And it's up there, man. We're up pretty far north. And in fact, the Titanic sank 300 miles off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland. To give you an idea of where that is. We played a show one night at a high school in St. John's. And after that show, we would have to drive pretty much all night to get to another show that was quite a distance back. We had driven all the way around Newfoundland, and now we're going to be driving back, and we were going to pick up a couple of more schools on the way back. So we played the show at a high school in Newfoundland, and it started snowing really hard outside during that show. The stage crew was made up of guys, usually from a gym class in the school, who would help us unload, set up, break down, load it all back up. And the guys on the stage crew were like, it's, you know, you're not going to want to take the main road back. Said there's another road you can take that'll cut an hour and a half off your trip. And you should take that road instead. And I'm like, okay, you sure? I was driving that night. So we took off and we started up this 2-lane road. And before long, it started going up, winding. And it's snowing like crazy. In fact, we had to stop to get snow off the headlights just so we could see. And I'm driving this big old bread truck, you know, a step van. And the guys are sitting back behind me. Oh, what's going on? We're going to be okay. Because we're kind of sliding this way. And it was hairy. It was not fun. And then about 30 minutes of that, and then it kind of flattened out, and then it started going downhill. And this was not fun at all. Now we're really swerving around. I'm taking it as slow as I can. There's no way we're saving time by doing this. It's crazy because the other way was a 4-lane highway with no mountains, no, you know, just flat. And just this is going on and on. The guys are freaking out. A couple of guys are shouting like, oh, you know, I'm going, we're okay. We're going to make it. And we finally get down to the bottom of that long mountainous range, and it flattens out and the road straightens out. And I see a sign that's partially covered with snow. And I can see that we're getting ready to hit the highway. I'm like, it's okay, guys. The highway's right up here. And on either side of this little road, there are ice banks from the plows that have been coming through, and they've been knocking all this stuff out. They're like 8 feet tall, solid ice, because it's Newfoundland. It's been snowing for weeks. So I'm thinking, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you, God, for delivering us from this evil. And I could barely see up ahead. It looks like this snowbank just goes right across the road. I go, whoa. And it turns out the road makes a sharp right turn and then joins the freeway, the highway. And I knew we weren't going to make it. I knew it. I knew we weren't going to make that turn. So I just turned the wheel as hard as I could. I said, everybody hold on. We're not going to make it. And the truck went sideways and started going down the road like this until we hit that ice wall and hit it hard, pretty fast. And the truck went up in the air, flipped over into a field, a rocky field on its side. And I was a driver, and all the glass blew out, my side windows, my front windshields, everything blew out. And the guys behind me, they all landed on top of each other. And there was one guy in a bunk up above, and he landed on his head. He was the manager. So bang, you know, it's like everybody trying to focus again and come back to what's going on here. And this has been a terrible accident, and nobody's hurt. Everybody's like, nope, I'm okay, which made no sense at all because this was a horrific crash. So we get our wits together, the manager, Dave, and myself. I was the assistant manager. We decide that we're going to walk up to the highway. We're going to look left. We're going to look right. And we're going to choose a way to start walking while the guys huddle in the truck on its side. And we're just going to start walking until we find some help. And it just was pure blackness on either side of, you know, whether it was north or south. And I looked to the left, which is not where we come from. We had come from that way. I looked to the left, and I thought I might see the faint glow of light, perhaps. I said, let's go that way. It's like, all right, here we go. And Dave and I walked. We figured it was about 5 miles that we walked until we came up upon this almost like a city. It was a phosphate processing plant, and the lights everywhere, brightly lit up, a huge operation, and was right on the water. And there were these huge freighter, tanker, ships, whatever, right there. Like, wow, this is insane. So we walked right up to the guard shack, told the guy what had happened, and he's like, oh, wow, we'll get you some help. And except he didn't sound like that because he was Canadian, eh? And he took us to a cafeteria and sat us down and gave us some coffee and started calling people up. And people started showing up. What happened? What happened? And there's no police around there. I mean, it's a wilderness area. And they got this fella. He showed up, and now he looked bad. He didn't look good at all. He had a big rake of scars across his face. I think one of his eyes was bad. And he just looked horrible. And he's short, and he had long, straggly hair. And I said, who's this? Oh, this is Mike. He drives the tow truck here. So we have a big diesel wrecker here, and we're going to take it out there, and we'll take you guys down there, and we'll get that truck upright, pulled up onto the road. And I'm just thinking, are you kidding me? This is crazy. I mean, there's a blizzard going on out there. And sure enough, man, they took us in a van. They packed us all in a van. I remember his white van showed up, and we got in that. We followed the tow truck down there. That guy, Mike, he took a cable and wrapped it around the truck and pulled the truck upright. Then he got out in front of the truck on the highway, long cable back to the truck. And he pulled that truck across that rocky field and got it up on the highway and, hooked it up. And we drove back to the phosphate processing plant. And by that time, there were other people waiting around for us. Now, it was about like 2:00 in the morning. Okay. And they said, okay, y'all get back in the van, and we're going to this place where there are beds for you where you can sleep for the night, and we'll take care of you. Anybody need to go to the hospital? They go to the doctor or anything? There's a hospital. There's no hospital around there. So we got in the van. They took us to actually a hotel, a little family place, nothing fancy whatsoever. He said, okay, now if you go up these stairs up here, there's a big room upstairs, and there's 5 beds in that room. And they're all made up, and they're all ready for you. Go for it. And man, we did it. We slept all night, got up the next morning. They didn't want any money. And Mike then drove our truck back to St. John's down the highway, which was an hour and a half, 2 hours, had no windows in it. And it was like 0 degrees outside, and the roads were rough. And he bundled all up, his scarf wrapped all around his head and just his eyes poking out. And he drove that thing. We followed him in the van. They had set it up to take our van to a glass shop where now the truck wasn't straight like this anymore. It was kind of like that after it hit the ground. And they had this custom cut glass to fit these things because it wasn't square anymore. But they put in for the side door windows and the front, and oh my gosh, they got it all done. They did it all in about 3 hours. And he said, see you later. We paid for the glass, by the way. They said, okay, see you later. I found out later after some letter writing back. That was before the internet. It was 1980, it was February 1980. And found out later that the people who had showed up and helped us were part of a church in that little town. They were all Jehovah's Witnesses. And I don't know if you know anything about JWs, but they love stuff like that. They love to help. And if they see if there's somebody in trouble and there's something they can do, they're going to do it. And it was an amazing time. It was really an amazing time. We ended up taking that truck back to the States. We drove it for about another month. We were in Pennsylvania, and the whole rear end of that thing went out. I couldn't drive it. And they had a new truck that had been put together. So they brought it up to us, and we got the new truck. So that's the end of that story. I'll have more stories about Young America Showcase other times. Anyway, so I appreciate you hanging out with me today. And don't forget, in life, you're going to meet a lot of challenges, and you've got a decision to make. You can either lead, you can follow, or get the hell out of the way and let people do their work. That's it. We'll see you next time on The Stan Show.